Hello, today I'll be doing a review on the Fiio K3 Headphone Amplifier and DAC. And then we also have the Fiio K1. So let's start with the box and accessories. The Fiio K1 comes in this plastic container, and they also do include a plastic clip, kind of similar to what you have with the Fiio A1. Otherwise, that's about it. And newer versions of this might come with a different box. And then we have the Fiio K3. And the amplifier and DAC would be in this foam piece in this plastic bag, and then your accessories would be down here in the box. And then it comes with a quick start guide. And the LED on the front does change colors depending if you're using a different sample rate or DSD, by the way. And a warranty card. And they include these rubber feet to put on the bottom of the amplifier and DAC. As you can see, I already used 2. So it comes with 4 in total. And then your USB cable will be in this plastic bag. And this is the only cable that it comes with, which is a standard USB, so you can plug this into your PC. And then the other end is Type-C USB, and that plugs into the amplifier DAC. And I do prefer Type-C over micro USB, because this one does feel a little bit more sturdy. And the cable is about 3 or 4 feet long, by the way. So let's move into build. Now for the K1, it is just a metal build, and then this has no features, so no volume control, no bass boost, and no balance, none of that. So you just get a micro USB on the back, so you plug your computer into that, and you have to control the volume on Windows, and I'll have the power requirements down in the description. And then in the front, we do have a blue LED right here. It might change colors depending on what sample rate you're using. And then you have your headphone out. And if you do put Windows volume at 100%, this does work as a line out. And that's basically it. Then we have the Fiio K3. It uses the same metal shell as the Fiio Q1 Mark II. So it has a very thin sheet of metal around it and built basically the same as the Q1 Mark II. And I don't like the build quality on this as much as the NX4 or NX5. And I think their build quality on their Fiio A3 or their A5 is better. Then we also have a very similar volume knob as the Q1 Mark II. So it has this very smooth but rubberized feel. And it's just a bigger volume knob than the Q1 Mark II, but basically the same. And the volume does not come in until you get like past this point here, until you get over here. And that's when the volume comes in. So very similar there as well. And you get a white indicator here. And again, I'll have the power requirements in the description. And it does click on and off, by the way. And your LED will be right in there. And then we'll start with the back. So we have our line out. So you can send the DAC to another amplifier. And then there's your your Type-C USB port. And we have a switch here, a metal switch. The switch between 2.0 and 1.0. So if you're using like Windows 7 or older, you can switch it to 1.0 to go into driverless mode. And then for some reason, they decided to put a coaxial output and an optical output on here. I'm not sure why they didn't put inputs. So I didn't bother to try to hook this up to like a game console because those are outputs. Unless they misworded that. And then on the bottom, as you can see, we have our rubber feet. So let's go ahead and move on to the front. Now I like the fact that they use these metal switches for high and low gain, instead of those plastic ones that stick out. And you have another one up here for our bass boost. And then next to that we have our headphone outs. So you get a 3.5 single netted connection, and then you also get your 2.5 balance output for headphones. So this could do single-ended or balanced. So that's basically it. And I also want to mention that this has no built-in battery. So this is for desktop use. And the same thing applies for the K1. It has no built-in battery. So this is for like using with like a laptop or something. So let's go ahead and start with the sound quality now. So first things first, you're probably going to ask me, is the Fiio K3 the exact same thing as the Fiio Q1 Mark II? And the answer would be no. So let's go ahead and start with the differences. So we're going to start with the treble first, since that should be the most obvious. So the Fiio Q1 Mark II has a warm, a little more of a mellow and lush, but rolled off and dark treble. While the Fiio K3 is not warm, it's not dark, it's not rolled off, it's not as lush or warm, it has a more transparent sounding treble. It has better clarity when I was testing some higher frequencies as well. And then we have the Fiio K1, and it's the same thing. It's not dark or rolled off like the Q1 Mark II. But this one comes across a little bit more sparkly up in the treble region, a little more metallic. And then the K3 is a little more neutral and a little more just transparent with better clarity. Next up, we have the bass. The Fiio K1 is going to be quite bass anemic, so the quantity is pretty weak. And then it also rolls off into the sub bass as well. So when I was testing it against the Fiio K3, you can tell, yes, the quantity is weaker, but the sub bass on the K1 is rolled off. So it's not going to have the same authority into the sub bass. So you're not going to get that punch or thump down low. Now the K3, it does have a little more impact into the sub bass than the Q1 Mark II. Just a little bit, but ultimately they're both about equally in quantity though. Now the Q1 Mark II is going to have some more mid bass and a little more upper bass. Now when I was testing the bass boost on the K3, you're going to notice that it's going to have a cleaner sounding bass. So ultimately I actually like the K3 better when it comes, if you're going to use the bass boost, if you're going to leave it on. Because it's going to be a little less bloated sounding, just a tiny bit. So it has a cleaner sounding bass, and you can really pinpoint that sub bass better as well. So let's move on to vocals. The vocals on the K1 are very good sounding, and they're a little bit forward. This one is not going to be as forward as the K1, but it's also not recessed on the K3. It's pretty neutral, and it also has very good sounding vocals. Now the sound quality on these are not going to be as good as other things, which I'll mention that later. But first, let's move on to single-ended versus balanced. Now, when you go single-ended on the Fiio K3, you're going to notice you're going to get a more blanketed sound. So it's kind of like there's a blanket. So you're going to lose some detail and you're going to lose some clarity. And when you go balanced, you should notice a little less warmth, and then the treble gets a little brighter. And you're going to get a little bit better clarity and detail. But more importantly, when you go balanced, it opens up the sound stage. So you have a more open sound. And with that, you get a little bit better sound separation, instrument separation, and sound isolation. So when I use the single-ended, things sound a little bit flatter, not as open sounding. And when you go balanced, you get a more open, just a better sound. Then I tested the balance, and by the way, I did not test the single-ended on this versus the single-ended on the Q1 Mark II. I did only balance versus balance, by the way. So let's go ahead and move on to sound stage. So like I said, on single-ended, it's quite narrow, and then on balance, it does open it up quite a bit, but I would not say that the sound stage is the widest that I've heard. And then the imaging is okay. It's not the best that I've heard either, even when you're running it balanced. And then you're going to also probably ask me is, how's the detail on this? Now, since this does have a little more of a transparent sound, particularly into the treble region, you are going to get some better detail on this than the Q1 Mark II. But ultimately, the sound quality on this is not as good as some higher end amps that I have, like the NX4 or NX5. And then we also have sound presentation. I'm not talking about tonal balance, but I'm talking about sound presentation. Now, the music doesn't come as intimate or inside your head sounding, because the Q1 Mark II kind of does have a sound presentation that's a little more intimate, a little more 2D. Well, this has a little bit more, it kind of takes a step back from the listener. Just a tiny, tiny, tiny step back when it comes to the sound presentation. Now let's talk about gaming. Now on single-ended, the gaming is kind of like, it's meh. It's not anything too great, but you should notice a big improvement when you go to balanced. And when you go balanced, I would say the gaming is pretty good. So you have pretty good sound isolation, so you should be able to pinpoint where a sound is coming from. And with the soundstage being opened up, you also get a better sense of depth as well. So I would say the gaming performance is pretty good if you use the balanced. But it doesn't have the best gaming performance that I've heard. I have some other things that do sound better for gaming than this. So I do want to point that out. So that's basically everything I want to talk about the Fiio K3. So let's move on to the conclusion. Oh, and by the way, I didn't really bother to test the DACs in these. I did test the K3 real quick, and it's not as good as the NX4 or NX5. I'll just put it that way. It does seem a little more transparent, though, than the Q1 Mark II, so I do like it a tiny bit better. And I didn't really bother to test this because I didn't have the time. I didn't really want to bother, because I'm going to point out the conclusion here. Start with the K1. Now, oh, by the way, the K1 is going to have better detail and better instrument separation than if you were to use the single-ended on the K3. The K1 is almost as good as the K3, but it has some major drawbacks though. Like, for example, no features, and then, like the bass is weak and it's rolled off. So let's go on to the conclusion. Now the K1 only goes for $40, and if you get it on sale, you can pay about 20 bucks. And if you have a laptop or a really old computer motherboard, and you need something that's pretty decent, then I would recommend the Fiio K1. Now here's the problem though. When I was testing my focal Elears, the K1 does not sound that great. And the same thing kind of applies to the K3. The Elears really like being put on a higher end amplifier and DAC. Like, these kind of sound a little bit, it's not as lively. Because when I was testing like the balanced on my DX7S on the Elears, this kind of loses some liveliness and some, like, it just doesn't sound right. And the K1 was mostly noticeable. It's just like, maybe it's because the amplifier is really weak or something. It doesn't quite sound right on the, but if I put my M1060Cs on this, that doesn't really care. If you give it a good amplifier, that's nice. But if you give it a not so great amplifier, it doesn't really care that much. Not as much as the Elears. So this, if you get it on sale for 20 bucks, and if you just need to replace like a crappy laptop sound, this will be good. And then we have the Fiio K3, and this is going to be hard to recommend because it's going, right now it's going for about 100 bucks. And at that price, I can't recommend it because you can get an NX4 on Mass Drop, which they changed their name to Drop, for about 130. And if you're not in the US, you might have to pay customs, so you might as well just get it on AliExpress. And they've had some sales on the NX4, including the NX5. And the NX5 has no DAC built in. But if I hook it up to my gaming motherboard, so no other DAC, just the gaming motherboard, it still has better sound quality than this. And the NX5, you can have it for about 90 bucks, and it's gone on sale for as cheap as like $70. And ultimately, it's going to have much better sound quality than the Fiio K3. And then that gets into my next point. So at 100 bucks, I can't recommend this. Now, if this goes on sale, because the Q1 Mark II used to be 100 bucks, but you can find that for 80. And then you've also had some sales, which you could have picked it up for about 60 bucks. Now, if you pick this up for 60 bucks, and you need, I don't know, I guess if you need a optical output, or a coaxial output for some reason, I don't know why you would need that, then yeah, for 60 bucks, this is okay. And it is going to go on my recommendations list, but only if you get it on sale. And then you also have to spend another $20 to get a balanced cable, which you can find cheap balanced cables, 2.5, not XLR, on eBay. And then Venture Electronics also has some really cheap ones as well. But ultimately, at $100, I can't really recommend this. So that's basically all I want to say. So thank you for watching.